91% of parents worry about their teenagers. So if you're worrying about your teenagers, you're incredibly normal, because 9 out of 10 parents worry about their teenagers. So that's the first thing, to not feel, that you are a awful parent for being excessively worried.
Sending your child with a disability or medical condition away from home to university can feel scary. I know because I've done it recently. I have a personal connection to today's guest, who is working with Abbott, the manufacturers of the Libre blood glucose monitor, which we've used on some research about what it's like for children with diabetes to transition to university. Deborah Christie is Professor of Paediatric and Adolescent Psychology at University College Hospital, London, and she has some top tips to support parents on this transition. My daughter and I have both worked with Deborah in the past on our personal struggles with the diagnosis. I feel a bit emotional saying that out loud, wow. And Deborah comes at it from a personal perspective too. Her teenage grandson was recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This is going to be an interesting conversation if you have children with diabetes, if you have diabetes, or if you have any kind of medical condition that leaves you feeling a little bit fearful about when your child leaves home. You're going to want to listen to this conversation if that sounds like you. Deborah, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, I have to apologise to anyone and to you who's watching, first of all, because I moved house about 4 weeks ago and I still have not got my Wi-Fi set. Well, I have, but in the room that I want to work in, it's not good. I've had a disaster already this morning. So people have to put up with me sitting on my sofa with a microphone right in my face, and I'm leaning forwards and backwards to reach my computer. So Deborah was just saying, just to try and remember to behave herself professionally and look in the right directions. I'm like, nah, we don't do that here. We just, what you see is what you get. Take us as you find us. How are you doing, Deborah?
Do you know, I'm great. I've got a mixed portfolio career now. I still work at UCLH, but not with the child service. I decided that they were already brilliant enough without me, and I could move on. But I still work a bit with UCLH with women's health. I work at Dartford and Gravesham NHS Trust as a consultant, helping them develop their paediatric psychology service as well.
Amazing.
Which is great fun. I just edit a journal. I do a bit of this and a bit of that, but still see young people with diabetes, and young people and their families, because no young person lives with it on their own, Helen.
No, that's true.
You know.
Yeah.
And then do a bit of work with Abbott as well.
Amazing. I mean, just to elaborate on how I know Deborah saw me for several sessions of counselling in, it probably was still the first year of Maddie's diagnosis with type 1 diabetes when she was only 10. I'm a qualified counsellor now, but I still am aware of the tears wanting to come whenever I start talking about that time. But you helped me massively. And we will talk about your grandson's diagnosis later in the podcast, but I'd be fascinated to know how it feels for you from an emotional perspective, having been on the other side of it as the professional supporting the people who are sitting there blubbering wrecks in your office. Deborah, before we go into that, we always start traditionally with a little bit of detail on my guest's own teenage years. So tell us, what was it like for you growing up, particularly as you got to teenage years?
I had a wonderful mum and dad who are no longer with us. Well, no longer physically with us, but still very much mentally, spiritually, emotionally supporting me in the background. And I was a very good girl to begin with. I'm wondering if my sister's listening. Yeah, I'm wondering if my sister's listening to this, because she'll be shouting at the computer. So no, you weren't. Lovely sister, really lovely sister, younger sister, best of friends still after
Lovely.
60 odd years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I became a teenager, I did what every teenager does. My brain was developing in a particular way. And whilst I was I was quite an overachiever, you know, worked very hard at school. But I was also very sociable, and I loved enjoying myself and go to parties. And as I got older, I started to do all the sorts of things that I have written about over the years. I've done them all that stuff. My dad picking me up after I'd had just a little bit too much of something that I shouldn't have drunk. And some mornings waking up saying, I'm never going to drink again. That didn't happen either.
No.
So yeah, I wasn't perfect at all. Thought my parents didn't understand me. And then I became a parent and realized they didn't.
Exactly.
Because we don't, even though we've been through it, even though we've been adolescents.
Yeah.
So yes, I did all the sorts of stuff like trying to sneak out the house and going out with inappropriate boys and drinking too much at parties, and my skirts were too short. And
of course.
Yeah, you know, literally read my chapter on adolescent development and I've done everything. Did it all.
Oh, right. This is a book you've written.
Well, I've written a lot over the years, and but also written about the development of the adolescent brain.
Right.
And how the brain underpins a lot of the things. You know, you think about an adolescent having a job description, you know, that their primary, requirement of an adolescent is to annoy the hell out of their parents. And to do that by not letting them know where they are and wanting to be completely independent, but at the same time demanding lifts home and, wanting to be like their friends and everything that an adolescent does over a period of time from 12 probably now all the way up to their late 20s is underpinned by the way that the brain develops. And so I've written a bit about that.
Oh, amazing. I'll get you to just kind of name check that book before we end, and I'll put the link in the show notes. But you've just reminded me of a brilliant title to a book which I read, which is exactly what you were just describing. I think it's called Mum, Get Out of My Life, but First Take Me and Kevin into Town.
Perfect. That's it. That sums it up. Yes,
it does,
that sums it up. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm not telling you where I'm going, but could you pick me up at 2 o'clock in the morning? You'll need to tell me where you are in order for that to happen.
Yeah. No, it's you're speaking to every parent of teenagers, which is pretty much most of the people listening to this. I've just got distracted by my dog yelling at the front door because somebody's knocked on the door, but I'm going to ignore that. And now there's someone right. So this is the joy of having just moved house and sitting in a room you don't normally sit in to do your recordings.
Well, thank goodness for the edit button, eh?
No, I'm not even going to bother. We started this podcast during lockdown and all sorts was going on in the house. So there was some drilling in the wall right next to me at one point. And I just went, you know what? I give up. Let's just bring it into the equation and talk about it. So that's the way we do it here.
Well, that's what life is though, isn't it? I mean, that's the other thing. It's that actually you can't edit out your life unless you believe all the rubbish on Instagram and social media. Actually, life is really messy. Life is messy and things happen that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
And of course, being diagnosed with diabetes is one of those things, you know?
Yeah. And it's a pretty big one. I remember for me, it derailed my entire life for 2 full years. And yet I tried to pretend at the time that it hadn't derailed my life and crack on as normal. And I do remember, and I still live to this day with this in mind, saying to my daughter and my family, this will not change any of how we live our life. And of course it has, but it will not stop you from doing anything you want to do. And we've made sure of that. And she now is thriving and at the age of 20 and has that same attitude. And I said that because she was a throw herself at life kind of person, from a very young age. And I was determined that it wouldn't change that about her. And I really believe that's a good thing to have done. However, it nearly broke me. It would have been so much easier to crawl into a corner and go, let's just stay at home and keep it simple. I'm assuming you have met both kinds of families in your work, the people who do get I mean, I did get ultra cautious, but I still made everything happen that could possibly happen.
Yeah. Do you know, I mean, again, there's, even though we talk about generalizations about adolescents, if you've met one adolescent, you've met one adolescent. And if you've met
Yes.
one parent of a child with diabetes, that's one parent. And I think that's often the mistake that people make when they're trying to support families, is that they say, well, this is what you have to do. That's rubbish, because actually what you have to do is what works for you as a family.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. There are some parents who, for them, what works best is being incredibly cautious and following the rules, almost 100%. And then there are families that go, I don't even believe this exists. It's almost like there's this sort of sense of, I'm just going to just carry on whatever and just carry on. And then, of course, and both of those are extremes on the end of a spectrum. And, nothing's right, but nothing's wrong. Everybody's trying to survive when a nuclear bomb has gone off in the middle of their family.
Yeah. And that is what it feels like. It is, for anyone listening who doesn't get it, who doesn't understand type 1 diabetes, it feels catastrophic when it happens. And that is something that's quite difficult to cope with, on the basis that the rest of the world who doesn't get it really thinks that diabetes is no big deal.
Yeah.
And what I've realized over the years is that it's not just type 1 diabetes, it's any diagnosis that really has a big impact on your life that other people don't understand. And it's made me really rethink my approach to other families who have different things like autism, who have serious nut allergies, for example. All sorts of things that affect their child, affect their family. I've just been talking to another guest, John Wilson Cooper, whose brother was born deaf. And growing up in that family was really difficult for him too, and for the entire family. And so I just do not judge anyone else's experience or how they choose to manage it. And I think in diabetes, that's one of the classics. Because we're told so many times by the media, well, you brought it on yourself, it's too much sugar, you shouldn't eat that, you should do this, you're a bad diabetic. And it just all adds to the stigma and the pain of the family, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think chronic illness, derails adolescent development. So as I said, if you think about it as a kind of a job description, an adolescent is trying to get through this period of time. Their brains are slowly developing. I mean, it's like an adolescent brain is a bit like this. This is all the inside. This is all the spinal cord, and this is all the inside where all the emotion is happening, and all the social requirements and that's all going on. And here, this is the bit that quietens it all down. This is the calm, sensible part of the brain. Well, an adolescent brain is like this.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, Deborah. For those people who are listening and can't see the video.
Oh, right, yes.
Deborah's holding her hand up, and she's the bit where all the emotion is the thumb stuck in the palm of the hand. And then the fingers are the bit that cover it and make it make sense. And she's waving those fingers around when she describes the teenager.
It's like a flip. Well, we call it flipping the lid. That's,
right.
The kind of like the emotion, and it's the emotional regulation. It's the ability to calm. If you think of the difference between your hand with your fingers waggling and your fingers in a sort of like a prayer-like position.
Yes.
The prayer-like position is when we get to 29, our brain is fully developed and fully formed. But up until that point, the young people are taking risks. Now, one of the things I always remember was a mum I met who said, the diabetes team want me to make sure that they have their insulin before they have their breakfast. Quite right, quite sensible. That's what the physiology tells us. Yeah. And so the insulin is taken, and then the kid goes, don't want any breakfast.
Well,
And yeah, okay, fine. Now what do I do? And
Yeah.
so, not surprisingly, a lot of young people with diabetes go, I'm not taking my insulin pre-prandially before the food. I'm not doing that because I don't know how much I'll eat, and then I'll have had too much, and then I'll go low, and then everybody will nag me because I've gone like blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you've got this constant kind of balancing normal because you want. Sometimes you want breakfast, sometimes you don't want breakfast.
Yeah, well, like a normal person, right?
Well,
And a
exactly.
normal person doesn't have to plan 20 minutes ahead exactly how much food they're going to eat
Yeah.
to match it with the medication they have to take to allow them to eat it.
So it is deeply annoying that the whole kind of presentation of diabetes, the confusion between type 1 and type 2 isn't recognized, that people don't understand the impact of a diagnosis of something that is going to be with you for the rest of your life that you can cope with. And as you know, Helen, the message that I've always tried to convey to people is it's just one tiny part of your life. It's not everything, but it will do its best to get in there and sneak about the house and trip you up and get in between you and cause arguments. And then it'll rush off going, ha, 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 I was successful mucking things up. And everybody's furious with each other, and diabetes is sitting in the corner chuckling,
Yeah, I always liken diabetes to a toddler throwing tantrums because whatever you do, it will do something you don't expect. And there are calm days when the toddler behaves itself really well, everyone gets on fine. And then there are a lot of other days, where it just does something really random, like run out into the road, and you've just got to cope and react in the moment.
And that's what you do have to do. You have to learn what it does is it destroys spontaneity.
Absolutely.
That's the thing that, every young person I've ever worked with, has looked at me right in the eyes and said, it's destroyed the ability to be spontaneous in my life.
Yeah.
And then what they do is they go, well, I'm just going to be spontaneous and
of course
and go with it.
Of course
they do that, but that's okay too, as long as you understand how to manage the consequences,
the fallout. Exactly.
And the fallout.
And so you were describing someone that really controls it to the nth degree. That was me for a few years, and whilst it was in my control rather than Maddie's, I really, really nailed it for her as best I could. I felt terrible about every slip up, and that's why I'm now a counsellor. I had to seek my own therapy because it's trying to control the uncontrollable. It's just not possible, and I had to learn that. But inevitably, when the young person gets freedom, independence, wants to be like everyone else, and wants a life, for God's sake. It isn't too much to ask. It's my daughter's at university now. I don't talk too much about her on the podcast because it's her story to tell now rather than mine. But of course she's being very spontaneous. She's having a lot of late nights. Her life is not routine. She is drinking alcohol. She wants to do what her friends are doing. It's just normal life. And so inevitably her blood sugar is more haywire than it was when she was completely there and my full-time job. I had to stop work for a couple of years because she was my full-time job. But we're very quick to judge people who don't toe the line exactly and call them bad diabetics. Actually, they're just people living their lives and having to drag along this toddler illness with them.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
And keep themselves alive.
Yeah.
And doing a fantastic job of keeping herself alive. Yeah. And university doesn't last forever. No. So on that note, let's get on to talking about going through. Well, yeah, actually, maybe you can tell me, first of all, I want to talk about going off to university, what it's like for them, what it's like for us parents, and the tips. But we'll do that in a second. I'd like to ask you how it was for you when your grandson was diagnosed. How old was he?
Okay, so it's my turn to get emotional now. And it was 18 months ago. He was 12, and you know, the irony of it all, really, because I've been working with young people and families for over 25 years now, developing interventions to try and support parents and interventions to support kids, and working one-to-one with people who have been really devastated and can't manage and can't function. And he was quite poorly, and my husband, his granddad, and I were both quite concerned. His mum and dad were quite concerned about him, and we kept saying there's something not wrong. And I kept saying things like, "Oh, it might be long COVID, or it might be chronic fatigue, or you know, maybe he's got an eating disorder." I completely missed it.
Right.
Completely
and it's so
missed it.
easy to miss.
Never occurred to me. He had all the T, you know, the thirst, tiredness. He had the weight loss. He was constantly drinking. He'd been with us the weekend before and drunk 2 liters of apple juice in about an hour. And he was losing weight. He was so skinny. Oh my God, I've got pictures of him. It just breaks my heart. Yeah, just awful. Anyway, went into hospital, and my son phoned me and said he's got a blood glucose of 1 million, whatever it was. And I said, well, I did swear, and said he's got diabetes. He's got diabetes, and my oldest son said, "Oh, you'll have to wait. You're not a doctor, mother. You're not a doctor, mother. You have to wait." And I said, "No, I'm not a doctor, but I believe me, I know about this." And my darling daughter-in-law and my lovely son. I've got two boys, and yeah, they were brilliant, and I did smile because I remember my daughter-in-law saying to me, "Well, you know, he's going to be great because he's such a good boy, and he's so clever. He'll be able to manage all of this perfectly." And I had to bite my tongue because I thought, well, he won't. It's going to be so difficult. My husband was devastated, absolutely distraught, and has become an expert on diabetes now. He has read every single thing you can read on it.
Yeah, that's a coping mechanism.
Yeah. I was distraught. Sums it up. I didn't cry in front of anybody in the family because it was like, okay, we've got this. I know enough people to make sure that we get the good help, and we make sure that we and I know stuff. And I kind of summed it up. I went from knowing to feeling. I went from knowing it in my head, pointing to my head for people that are just listening.
Yeah.
To feeling it in my heart, pointing to where my heart is now.
Yeah.
I feel everything that I knew. And we had a small disagreement yesterday. To example, he's now 14. He's a very bright kid, very bright boy. But he knows everything.
Yeah.
And he knows everything because he's 14. Yes. And he was high, and then he was low, and then he was high, and then he was low, and he was doing an English mock.
Right.
And when he came home from school, I happened to be there, and I heard his mum say to him, "I've been looking at your sugars all day, and you were down at 2, which is very, very low for people that don't know. And and I couldn't get through to you. Where were you?" And he said, "Stop going on at me." He was really cross with his mother. And when I said to him, "Did the teachers not give you some extra time to manage your highs and your lows?" He said, "I didn't need extra time. I was fine. I was perfectly all right." And I said, "If you're writing an essay and your blood sugars are 18, you're not perfectly all right."
No.
And he said, "I know what I'm capable of. I don't need any extra help. I don't." And he stormed off up the stairs, and we were all left standing looking at each other. And my daughter-in-law, God bless her, rolled her eyes. She is wonderful. And she tries to run the gamut of perfect control, let him what he needs to do. She runs back and forwards between those two extremes, constantly worried. And I've had nights where we've been on the phone to each other, WhatsApping, because she's been so concerned about him. My husband has him on the app, so that he can, that flipping app. I've turned my can I just say I've turned my notifications off. I don't want to know. I'm not. I
No.
can't bear
There's
it.
nothing you can do about it.
No, I
So,
can't bear it.
yeah,
If I am like I was at a conference, last month, and I'm in a foreign country, what am I going to do if he's high? I know that he is quite sensible most of the time. Some of the time, I'm not quite
he
sure.
knows how to keep himself alive.
He does, but I know that his mum is WhatsApping him, and I know that his dad is WhatsApping him,
Exactly.
and his granddad is doing it too, driving
Yeah.
him insane. And we're going to get onto technology, aren't we?
Well, yes. So that's. I was just thinking, for those people listening who don't have diabetes in the family, what Deborah's describing is a continuous glucose monitor, or a sensor which reads the levels of blood glucose, to simplify things, and can send those levels to a carer or a parent's phone, anybody's phone, so that we can see that remotely. I can see my daughter's blood sugar on my phone every 5 minutes. And it gives peace of mind. For me, largely, it helped me sleep. It meant that I could go to sleep knowing that if she was in trouble with either a high or a low blood sugar, I would get an alarm and I'd be told about it, rather than me waking up every hour or so thinking, is she okay? And having to go and prick a finger in the night to check. So that's the tech that Deborah's talking about. And Abbott's Freestyle Libre is one of those monitors, and you'll see people wearing it. It looks a bit like the dreaded monitor that people have on their arms. It looks kind of exactly the same. That's not for diabetes purposes, but Abbott's Libre was created for monitoring blood glucose levels for diabetics. I'm not up to date on Abbott's technology, Deborah. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, it's a good summary, and it's amazing. The continuous glucose monitors now that exist allow you don't have, in the old days when I first started, and when you probably first started, kids had to prick their fingers, stick their fingers with a little sharp lancet, and if they were being very, very good, to use that awful expression, they would have to do it every 2 hours. You would have to keep checking your blood sugars, and you would have to. So kids had band-aids on their fingers, or their fingers would go numb. It was absolutely awful. And so the development of a little thing that you wear on your arm, if people are strictly Come Dancing fans, they'll see it on Nikita. He's got a little white circle on his arm, and that's basically telling his phone what his blood glucose is and whether he's safe to keep dancing. So that is amazing. I think that is just incredible. And things like pumps as well that have been developed to allow the delivery of safe amounts of insulin, to stop insulin. They're so clever now. I mean, and again, when I think back to the very first pump that I learned about 20 odd years ago, it was mind blowing then. But now what they can do is even more incredible. So they can actually stop insulin if you're going very low. They can measure that. They know because of the little glucose meter. And so they can stop delivering it. If you're going low, they can give you a little bit more if you're going high. And so they can try to help manage. So whilst parents make perfect pancreases, practically perfect pancreases, the new technology kind of offers an enormous amount of hope and a reduction in the constantly being in your mind. But I mean, it's still in your mind.
The emotional burden.
Yeah, it is. It's a fantastic emotional burden. I mean, we worry about our kids anyway. I got two boys. They were both excellent adolescents. They also followed me. It's like they'd read my book. They knew exactly what to do. But I didn't have with them the worry of a chronic illness. I was very, very lucky.
No.
They just did stupid things like play rugby and break their noses and their collarbones. So that was all I had.
There's always
to worry
something,
about.
isn't there?
Oh, always, yeah. And both of them, I had one of them went off to Italy to go to university. I mean, it was like, could you not go any further? Could you,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, I've got
And
one that's interested in Australia.
oh, excellent. Yeah. I always remember getting the phone call to say, I've locked myself in my apartment in Milan.
Excellent.
Yeah. And it was like,
Is that not the point at which you go, what do you want me to do about it?
well,
See
of course,
ya.
you know what I did? I immediately got onto a locksmith in Italian, told the
No.
locksmith where he was, in Milan, had the locksmith go out and rescue him.
Oh, why do we always jump in and rescue our kids? We just do, don't we?
Helicopter parent.
Yeah.
Anybody that's making, please don't write what a helicopter parent on the comments. I was just doing what I thought was. Please don't write that.
Exactly. So on that basis, that our kids really don't seem to have any fear. I mean, I know they do, but they don't let us as parents know that they've got any fear about doing all sorts of stuff that could damage them and cause them problems. What are your tips for us as parents and them who are doing it on when they leave and go to university, which is for most of them the probably the first time they'll be away from home for prolonged periods of time, out of contact at times with their parents?
The first thing I would say is that the first tip is to remember. The first tip is to remember that you are an expert as a parent. The only parenting experts are parents. All parents know what they need to do for their kids, and as a result of that, the Abbott research showed that 91% of parents worry about their teenagers. So if you're worrying about your teenagers, you're incredibly normal, because 9 out of 10 parents worry about their teenagers. So that's the first thing, to not feel that you are a awful parent for being excessively worried.
Right.
And actually, I mean, it's nearly 8 out of 10. It's 79%. So nearly 8 out of 10 UK parents aren't convinced their kids are ready to go off and be independent. So again, if you're thinking, oh, I've done a dreadful job as a parent because my kids aren't ready for independence, you're not alone. There's in a room of 10 parents, there'll only be 2 that are mistakenly believing that their kids are ready.
Yeah. Well, but also I'm guessing there's another stat that says that when most of those kids go off unprepared and unready, they're usually all right.
Well, there is that. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I, as you know, Helen, from our work together, I actually never ever gave advice. I just always got you to discover the solutions within yourself.
Yes.
It's a sneaky way. It's a sneaky trick us psychologists like to do.
Well, but it works better that way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
as a counsellor, I now know this. If I tell someone what to do, it's going to kind of bounce off the edges. Whereas if I let them arrive at what they want to do, it creates change.
So helping, I think, people can believe, and I would say, look at what you have done and look at examples of them being independent. Did they get to go to school on their own? Did you teach them to get on a bus and go to a school and survive secondary school? Did you teach them how to do that? So you did that. How did you do that? What were the steps that you took to get them? And often parents will go, oh, well, that was easy because I showed them the route and I helped them, keep their money safe. And it wasn't always successful because they'd lose their bus money, but I then helped them by showing, so parents have already started to do that. So they have done it successfully. So one of the things is look back on what you've already done successfully. I mean, the other thing to do is to kind of have lots of conversations. And I know that's difficult because, as I said, kids are very good at but you can do things in silence. You don't actually have to talk. But, do they know how to use the washing machine? Have you done something like say to them, put some washing on. And then when they stand looking at it, you can say, oh, let me just show you how it works. So you can do things in a sneaky kind of way. And you could have your own checklist, depending on where they're going, of skills that I want them to be good at. So I'd like them to be able to do more than boil an egg. So get them to cook the tea or cook the tea with you. Or I mean, again, my 12-year-old granddaughter, she's great. She's a super duper cook. So no concerns about her. She might eat omelets for a year if she
Right.
was
But she'll survive.
but who cares? That's
Yeah,
fine.
exactly.
And Xander, my grandson, he won a cooking competition at school. He's actually making chocolate fondants. The Master Chef disaster. He actually made.
I'm sure you can live on chocolate fondants.
You can live
I reckon
on
that's
chocolate.
possible.
You do have to correct quite a lot for them.
If you're diabetic, you've got to take some insulin. Yeah, just be careful.
But so there's something about preparation, and that perfect preparation is one of those things you have to do. So lots of prepping, so that if you did suddenly vanish off the scene, and you're never ever going to vanish off the scene. That's the other thing. You'll always be there.
Yeah.
And
I think what you're saying, the first point you made was trust yourself effectively.
Yes.
You've done this before when you and they didn't know how, and it was fine. And some things went wrong, and things will go wrong, but you've always managed to sort it out, and you will manage to sort it out. And then your other point is there's things that they're already good at. There's things you can teach them. And I want to add to it, there's things that you might not think to teach them, but there's phones and social media now. And I've heard of countless parents who get around kind of 6 o'clock in the evening, their phones start to ping with, "Mum, how do you roast a potato? And is this the right temperature to cook a chicken?" And so we've got, they're not, they will reach out if they know somebody. Now, the roast potato thing is a personal one. They're cooking a Christmas dinner.
Oh, lovely.
My daughter and her flatmates. And she's like, "Your roast potatoes are the best. How do you do them? What's the recipe?" I talked her through it, and no doubt she'll do a great job.
No, and that kind of does bring us back to technology. So again, there is a belief as an adult that technology is going to offer peace of mind. So what Abbott found when they did their survey was that, again, it's quite high actually, that over 9 out of 10, 92% of parents believe that technologies can provide peace of mind and offer support. Now, I think that has to come with a bit of a health warning. That's what the parents believe. The young people can often find that really irritating.
Yes.
So from a personal perspective, Xander hates the fact that people can see his sugars. He hates it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's tough, basically. And that's kind of the message, which is, well, that's okay, but I need to know, Mum needs to know that you are breathing, that you're functioning.
Yeah,
And
especially at his age.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Once they're over 18, it's their decision. Maddie keeps me watching her numbers because she likes to know that I'm a safety net. She doesn't hear her alarms sometimes in the night.
Yeah.
She'll always hear my phone ring if I call her.
Yeah.
So if I think she's asleep and isn't aware of a dangerous blood sugar, I'll give her a call. And she keeps me following her for that reason. One day she's going to say, "Mum, I'm sick of it. I don't need you anymore. Stop."
Yeah.
And that'll be really tough, but it'll be good for me, and I'll switch off.
Yeah. And they will be able to tell you when they don't need you anymore. And I think that's the other thing. That actually young people, I remember this myself, so that young people often want to be independent but dependent. And it's like interdependent. You're not completely independent because nobody is.
No, that's true.
Unless we live all on our own with no contact with anybody in the world, then and only then are we independent. But you're always dependent upon somebody. I'm dependent upon my husband, and he's dependent upon me. We kind of, cook tea together and drive places. And your kids still come on holiday with you. And it's great to have things like sharing live locations. I do that when I get in an Uber. Am I supposed to say other call up taxis are available?
You can say whatever you like on my podcast.
Okay, fine. Well, when I get in one of those cars that you phoned up to get you, I always share my location with my husband.
Yeah.
Always, I've got it set up on my phone, and I always share my location. He does say, "Why are you sharing your location?" I said, "So you know I'm safe, darling."
Yeah. And where I've gone.
That's quite a nice one. And again, that one is a good one. There's, instant messaging is great. I mean, and all the kids are doing that. They're Snapchatting and everything.
Exactly.
Like
They're
that.
all interdependent with each other.
They're all of doing that. And then for something like diabetes, of course, you've got now, and we talked about this earlier, you now have the ability to not need to prick your finger and to be able to notice when you're in a situation, the direction that your blood glucoses are going, and to then make a decision. And it's about choice. People deserve choice. And they can learn that if they chose not to do anything, maybe they didn't get the grade in that exam that they got. Or so they'll think, well, you know what, the next time I will. But people have to make and we have to let people make their own mistakes too.
Yeah.
You know, and I will put my hand up and say, I have this ridiculous game that I play with myself where I go, I'm being a grandma, I'm not a psychologist. when I'm talking with Xander, because because what a pain in the neck to have a psychologist for a grandma.
Well, I get that with I got told not to therapize someone last night.
Yeah, welcome to my world. Yes, that's right. Stop being a psychologist.
I didn't realise I was doing it. I'm like, okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah. Fair point.
But all of that sort of stuff, and I think one of the great things about the Abbott research is to help people, is to reassure people that you're not strange if you worry, that you're not strange if you actually don't feel your kids are ready to be independent. You might be wrong, because they probably will be able to be independent enough, but every parent you walk past, there's almost that silent, I'm one of you, parent nod. And that actually technology can help, can provide peace of mind.
Absolutely.
Even if it's just your peace of mind. And you might need to say that to your kids. And I used to say that to my boys. I used to say to them, I'm not asking you to text me to make you feel better. I'm asking you to text me to make me feel better. Because if something happens to you, I want to know how to get in the car and where to go to get you. And so it's not to make you feel better. It's entirely for me. So do your mother a favor.
Can you do that for me? Yeah.
That's all you need to do. Or say,
sometimes it's just about explaining how it makes you feel when you are at sea without that information.
Yeah, and I won't, Mum, I'm staying at John's tonight. Fine. Where does John live? And nowadays, and now you can do a drop. Just thanks, drop your pin. And it's no big deal. They just press a little button, drop a pin, and you now know where John lives. And so if you needed to, you're in a situation where you can now actually go to sleep, or rather than spend all night wide awake, which I have done occasionally over the years.
Yes. How it must have been for our parents. I don't know, when there was no tech. Thank God for the tech. Deborah, is there somewhere where people can access this research and information and tips from the surveys that Abbott's done?
Well, ironically, there was a little article that I wrote, which was published in the Mail Online, but people were really rude, and I got trolled for.
Okay.
People were really horrible. They put these horrible comments on. But
that's a whole other podcast.
Well, absolutely, and dealing with trolls. But it was, I think people took exception to the fact that they decided to do a headline that said I was a parenting expert, which of course
no one likes that.
And of course that then made my boys laugh hysterically, because they said,
yeah, of course.
I don't think so. So that was fine. But I think, I'm sure that there must be a link that Abbott can give you.
I will find it. So because I think these are all really interesting points, and I bet there's even more stuff that has come out of it that some people will be interested in. So I will find that, and I will drop it into the show notes for anybody that wants to delve into this a bit deeper.
And I guess I wanted just, if it was all right, Helen, to say that that adolescence, living through adolescence as an adolescent and as the parent of an adolescent is tough.
Yes.
And having a chronic condition will make it significantly more likely that you will face additional challenges. But I think it's also important that people are listening need to remember that actually kids have more commonalities than differences, particularly kids with chronic conditions. They find ways to live their life well. And this, whatever condition they have, it's one little part of the jigsaw It's it's a quote that one of the young people I worked with, and she said, I realized that diabetes is just one bit of the big, great, wonderful, exciting jigsaw that is my life.
Oh, wow.
And
She
I've
sounds amazing.
never forgotten that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, and that was a young person that told me that. So
Amazing.
I do hope people just remember that they are doing their best as a parent, and that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Do your best.
No, really good point. Deborah, where can people find your book or anything else that can connect you with them?
I've got a website now, which
Excellent.
is quite exciting, which is www.deborahchristieconsulting.com.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so that's my website.
I'll
And
put that
of course
link into.
you can actually just Google me, and a lot of my papers and stuff will come up. So if there's a particular area if you put Deborah Christie diabetes into Google, then some of the papers come up. And there is a book that's still available on Amazon now on Kindle, which is good because it's dead cheap on Kindle.
Yeah.
And again, if you put Deborah Christie and diabetes into Amazon, then it's living with diabetes for children and families, psychosocial issues, psychosocial aspects of diabetes for children, adolescents, and families.
Right, which sounds like a really technical way of saying it's about how you're feeling and what's going on in your life and around you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's got it's a bit old now, but it's still. I think the chapters on understanding the emotional issues, the technical stuff about diabetes management needs updating. I hope the publisher's listening. And we, it could do with being redone, but all of the stuff about how you manage the living with it, the really important stuff, how you manage the emotional demands and the social demands and the psychological
That's never going to
demands.
change, is it?
That's never going to change. No, that's exactly the same. Tech might help make it a little bit easier, but basically what comes down to is, just finding a way to get on with your life and do your best.
Exactly that. Thank you, Deborah, for that insight. And I will put all of those links into the show notes for anybody who wants to know a bit more or connect with Deborah.
It's been so nice talking with you. I've so enjoyed it.
Really good to catch up.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give it a rating on your podcast app. And if you know someone who might benefit from listening, do share it with them. It also means a lot when you give me feedback. So if you have comments or suggestions for another episode, or know someone who'd like to tell their story on the Teenage Kicks podcast, do get in touch at helen@helenwills.com, or come and find me on my blog, actuallymommy.co.uk. Head over there now for more articles on the joys, and there are many, of parenting a teenager. Bye for now.